My name is Ricky Dawson, a 67-year-old retired construction worker from Boston. For 42 years, Margaret was my everything until cancer took her 8 months ago. Last month, during my birthday party, I stepped outside for air and overheard my son James talking to his wife. His words cut deeper than any wound I ever suffered on a job site. He said I would die with nothing. What James never knew was that his mother had left behind secrets that would change everything. A letter, a house in Vermont, and $3 million. Before I tell you how I discovered my late wife's secret life, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about family betrayals and unexpected comebacks. I grew up in a blue-collar family in Massachusetts. My father worked at the docks, and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. They taught me the value of hard work and saving every penny. I was never book smart, but I could fix anything with my hands. That skill served me well throughout my life. I met Margaret during my second semester at community college. She was studying education, her eyes always bright with ambition and kindness. I was struggling with classes but working part-time in construction. After that first year, I dropped out to work full-time. The money was good, and book learning was never my strength. Margaret supported my decision even though her parents disapproved. They wanted their daughter to marry someone with a college degree and professional career. We got married in 1979 in a small ceremony at her parents' church. Nothing fancy, just close family and a few friends. Our first apartment was a one-bedroom walk-up above a hardware store. The floors creaked, the pipes clanged, and the windows leaked cold air in winter, but it was ours. Margaret made curtains from fabric she found on sale, and I built shelves from scrap wood. We were happy with what little we had. James came along in 1982. I remember holding him for the first time, his tiny hand gripping my calloused finger. The responsibility of fatherhood hit me hard. I started taking every overtime shift available. Margaret went back to teaching after 6 months, and we juggled childcare between us and her mother. 4 years later, Abigail was born, completing our family. Margaret called her our little surprise blessing. In 1990, after years of saving, we bought our small house in the suburbs, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, with a postage stamp yard. Nothing special to most people, but to us, it was everything. I built a workshop in the garage, and Margaret planted flower gardens that became the envy of the neighborhood. That house witnessed 40 years of birthday parties, holiday gatherings, homework struggles, teenage arguments, and quiet evenings on the porch swing. We lived modestly throughout our marriage. I drove the same pickup truck for 15 years until it practically fell apart. Margaret clipped coupons every Sunday and could stretch a grocery budget like nobody I ever met. We took the same vacation every summer, renting a simple cabin by Lake Winnipesaukee for 1 week. The kids complained as teenagers that we never went anywhere exciting like Disney World or the Grand Canyon, but those lake vacations gave us some of our happiest memories. Margaret worked her way up from classroom teacher to school administrator. She was good with numbers and organization. The extra income helped, especially as college approached for the kids. We agreed early on that our children would have the education opportunities we never had. Every spare dollar went into their college funds. Our children took different paths in life. James always had big ambitions. He was smart and charming, qualities he inherited from his mother. After college, he went into real estate development. At first he struggled, but eventually found success. As his business grew, so did his lifestyle. He bought a large house in an exclusive neighborhood, drove luxury cars, joined the country club, and took exotic vacations. He married Amanda, a marketing executive who shared his taste for the finer things. They had 2 children who attended private schools and had everything they could possibly want. Abigail was different. She followed her mother into education, becoming an elementary school teacher. She married a good man named David who worked as a physical therapist. They bought a modest home 20 minutes from ours and had 3 children. Abigail never seemed interested in status or luxury. She found joy in simple things, just like her mother. They visited us every Sunday for dinner, and her children spent countless weekends with us while growing up. 3 years ago, Margaret started feeling unusually tired. She dismissed it as age catching up with her. We were both in our 60s, after all. When she found a lump during a shower, we both tried not to panic. The doctor visits that followed brought the worst news possible. Stage 3, breast cancer. The next 2 years became a blur of treatments, hospital stays, and praying for miracles. Margaret faced it all with incredible grace and strength. She would joke with nurses while receiving chemotherapy and bring small gifts for other patients she met during radiation treatments. James visited when he could, but his busy schedule limited his time with us. He would rush in, ask how things were going, and then rush out for important meetings. Sometimes he would send expensive flower arrangements or fruit baskets after missing important doctor appointments. Abigail took a leave of absence from teaching to help during the worst periods. She drove Margaret to appointments, researched treatment options, and stayed overnight when I was too exhausted to function properly. The medical bills piled up despite our insurance. I sold my fishing boat and some of my best tools. Margaret insisted we not touch the retirement savings, saying we would need that later. In her final months, as the cancer spread to her bones and lungs, she seemed strangely at peace. She spent hours writing in journals and making phone calls when I was out of the room. I assumed she was saying goodbyes to old friends and colleagues. Margaret passed away peacefully one morning while I held her hand. She simply took a final breath and then was gone. The house felt empty without her laugh, her footsteps, her gentle humming as she worked in the kitchen. 8 months later, I was still finding notes she had left in random places. A heart drawn on a recipe card. A message in my winter coat pocket saying simply, "I love you, my rock." Little reminders that our love story continued even after she was gone. My birthday fell on a Saturday this year. I tried telling the kids not to make a fuss. Celebrating seemed wrong without Margaret there to bake my favorite chocolate cake with maple frosting. But Abigail insisted, saying Mom would want us to continue family traditions. She organized a small gathering at my house. Nothing elaborate, just family, some neighbors, and a few of my friends from the construction days. James promised to arrive by noon to help set up. By 3 o'clock, there was still no sign of him. Abigail kept checking her phone, tension visible in her shoulders. He finally pulled into the driveway at 3:15, stepping out of a brand new German luxury car that probably cost more than I made in 3 years of work. Amanda trailed behind him, looking bored and checking her phone constantly. I love that boy. But sometimes, I hardly recognize the man he has become. He walked through the front door without knocking, glanced around the living room, and immediately commented on how outdated the place looked. Dad, you really should consider updating this place if you ever want to sell. Those wood-paneled walls went out of style in the 80s. Abigail shot him a warning look while arranging plates on the dining room table. I just nodded and offered to take their coats. No sense starting an argument at my own birthday party. Throughout dinner, James kept checking his phone beneath the table. Amanda barely touched her food, claiming to be on some new diet that prohibited practically everything on her plate. Their children, Taylor and Ethan, sat glued to their tablets, headphones firmly in place. So different from Abigail's kids, who helped serve food and engaged in actual conversation with the adults. After we finished eating, James presented me with his gift, a book titled Smart Retirement Planning for Seniors. Inside, he had written, "To help you make the most of what you have left." Abigail gave me a hand-carved fishing lure and a photo album filled with family pictures, including many of Margaret that brought tears to my eyes. The conversation eventually turned to my retirement plans. James started asking pointed questions about my finances. How much was left in my retirement accounts? Had I considered downsizing? Was I aware of current property values in the neighborhood? His questions made me increasingly uncomfortable, especially in front of everyone. When he suggested I should sell the house because it was too much for a single man to maintain, I needed a break. I excused myself, saying I needed some fresh air. The early evening was cool but pleasant. I walked to the wooden bench Margaret and I had placed beneath the old oak tree in our backyard. We used to sit there in the evenings, watching the sunset and talking about our day. I missed those simple moments most of all. As I approached the bench, I noticed James and Amanda standing on the back porch, deep in conversation. Not wanting to interrupt, I paused near the garden shed. Their voices carried clearly in the quiet evening air. What I heard next stopped me cold. "He will die with nothing. Dad wasted everything they worked for," James said, his voice tinged with disgust. "How much do you think the house is worth?" Amanda asked. "The neighborhood has gone up in value, right? Maybe 300,000, if we fix it up first. But he is letting it fall apart. Did you see the water stain on the kitchen ceiling? Typical dad, ignoring problems until they become disasters. We need to convince him to move into assisted living," Amanda suggested. "That way we can sell this place while property values are still high." James laughed, a sound without humor. "Good luck with that. He is as stubborn as they come. But I am working on him. He cannot afford to stay here much longer anyway. Those medical bills ate up most of their savings." Their words hit me like physical blows. My own son, talking about me as if I were already dead, as if my only value lay in what assets I could pass along. "The real problem," James continued, "is his financial incompetence. Mom handled all the money. Dad never had a clue about investing or planning. He just worked and handed over his paychecks. Now he is a financial burden to the whole family." A financial burden. Is that how my son saw me? After decades of hard work, after putting him through college without a penny of debt, after all the sacrifices Margaret and I made. But the comment that cut deepest came next. "Mom would be disappointed in how he has handled everything," James said with authority. "She was always the practical one. She would have sold this place already and made smart investments with the proceeds." My chest tightened painfully. My hands began to shake. 42 years I had been married to Margaret. James thought he knew her better than I did? He thought she would want me to abandon the home we had built together? I walked quietly to the side door, slipping back into the house without them noticing. For the rest of the evening, I went through the motions of celebrating. I smiled at jokes, thanked people for gifts, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, something had broken. James was all artificial cheerfulness when saying goodbye, hugging me too tightly and promising to call soon about some investment opportunities he had identified for me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Abigail was the last to leave. She studied my face with concern. "You okay, Dad? You seem distracted." "Just tired, sweetheart. It has been a long day." She did not look convinced but did not push. That was Abigail, always sensitive to others' feelings. After a final hug, she left with her family, and I was alone. I sat in Margaret's reading chair that night, surrounded by her books, her knitting basket still beside it, untouched since her passing. Would she be disappointed in me? Had I failed to handle things as she would have wanted? The questions haunted me throughout a sleepless night, James' words replaying endlessly in my mind. In the weeks following my birthday, James called more frequently than he had in years. Each conversation circled around to my finances. He suggested I start selling unnecessary possessions. The fishing gear in the garage, the workshop tools I had collected over decades, even Margaret's china cabinet, which he called outdated and taking up too much space. He began stopping by unannounced, always with brochures for retirement communities and assisted living facilities, Sunny Pines, Golden Horizons, Pleasant Valley. The glossy photos showed smiling seniors playing cards and doing water aerobics. The fine print revealed costs that would deplete my remaining savings in a matter of years. I began avoiding his calls, letting them go to voicemail. I made excuses when he wanted to visit. I needed time to process the betrayal I felt, to figure out how to move forward with the knowledge that my son saw me as nothing but a financial problem to solve. Abigail noticed the tension between us. During our weekly Sunday dinner, she gently asked what was happening. "James keeps pushing me to sell the house and move into one of those old folks' homes," I told her. She frowned, setting down her fork. He mentioned something about helping you right-size, but I had no idea he was being so pushy about it. Do you want to sell? This is my home, Abby. Your mother's home. Every corner holds memories of our life together. How could I walk away from that? She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then you shouldn't. Whatever you decide, David and I support you. Her words provided temporary comfort, but my financial reality was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The final medical bills arrived, larger than I had anticipated. The roof developed a leak that would cost thousands to repair properly. The furnace, original to the house, made alarming noises during the first cold snap of fall. My retirement savings, while not completely depleted, looked insufficient for the years ahead. Social Security covered the basics, but little more. To make ends meet, I started taking on small handyman jobs around the neighborhood, despite the arthritis that made my fingers stiff and painful on cold mornings. I sold my fishing equipment piece by piece. The custom rods that had accompanied me on countless early mornings by the lake. The tackle box Margaret had given me for our 20th anniversary. The waders, the nets, the flies I had tied myself during long winter evenings. Next went most of my workshop tools. The table saw I had used to build bookcases and toy chests for the grandchildren. The router that had helped create the intricate trim around our front door. Each sale felt like giving away pieces of myself. But I was determined to keep my home, to prove James wrong about my financial competence. Then came the day that pushed me to my breaking point. I had been grocery shopping, carefully selecting items on sale, using coupons Margaret had taught me to clip and organize. I returned home to find James' car in the driveway, along with another vehicle I did not recognize. I entered through the front door to find James and a woman in a business suit standing in my living room. She had a tablet in hand and was gesturing toward the windows while speaking. The comps in this neighborhood are strong right now. With a few cosmetic updates, we could list competitively and expect multiple offers. As I mentioned, the quick sale package includes professional staging and photography. James noticed me first, having the decency to look momentarily embarrassed before quickly recovering. Dad, this is Lindsay Parker from Premier Realty. I wanted to get her professional opinion on the house. The shock I felt quickly turned to anger. My face grew hot as I set down the grocery bags on the entry table. You brought a real estate agent into my home? Without asking me? Lindsay smiled brightly, extending her hand. Mr. Dawson, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your son speaks so highly of you. I was just telling him that this house has wonderful potential. With the right updates, you could maximize your return in this seller's market. I ignored her outstretched hand. Get out. His smile faltered. I beg your pardon. I turned to James. Both of you, get out of my house, now. Dad, be reasonable, James said, using the placating tone one might use with a difficult child. We are just exploring options. You need to be practical. This house is too much for you to handle alone. Practical? I repeated, my voice rising. You bring a stranger into my home behind my back, and you talk about being practical? James sighed dramatically. This is exactly what I was concerned about, Lindsay. My father is having trouble adjusting to life without my mother. She would want what's best financially. That was the final straw. Do not presume to tell me what your mother would want. You have no idea. The real estate agent gathered her things quickly, muttering about calling another time. James followed her to the door, apologizing for the scene I had caused, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. After she left, James turned to me, his expression hardening. You are making a huge mistake, Dad. This house is your only significant asset, and you are letting sentimentality cloud your judgment. I am just trying to help. I help me, or help yourself to whatever you think you deserve from me? I asked quietly. His face reddened. That is unfair. I am looking out for your best interests. Someone has to make the hard decisions here. I think I have made my decision very clear. This conversation is over. Please leave. He shook his head in disappointment. Fine. Call me when you are ready to be reasonable. After he left, I sat on the stairs and cried for the first time since Margaret's funeral. Not just for the betrayal, but for the realization that my son and I had become strangers to each other. In the weeks that followed, the family divided into camps. James told relatives I was becoming irrational, unable to manage my affairs since Margaret died. Some family members began calling to check on me, with thinly veiled concern that felt more like surveillance than support. Abigail discovered what James had done and confronted him. Their argument was so severe that we canceled Thanksgiving dinner for the first time ever. James' wife began spreading rumors about my mental state, suggesting I might need more than assisted living, perhaps a facility with memory care. I became increasingly isolated and depressed. Friends invited me less frequently to gatherings, perhaps influenced by what they had heard. I spent more time alone in the house, talking to Margaret's photos, wondering what she would advise me to do. Christmas Eve marked my lowest point. I sat alone in the living room, a small artificial tree in the corner with only a few ornaments, nothing like the elaborate decorations Margaret used to put up throughout the house. I held her photo in one hand and an assisted living brochure in the other. Maybe James was right. Maybe I was being stubborn and impractical. The house felt too big, too empty, too full of maintenance issues I lacked the energy to address. I found Margaret's old checkbook in her desk drawer, her handwriting barely legible in the final entries. Had she known how quickly our savings would dwindle? Had she worried about my financial future without her? For the first time, I seriously considered selling the house that held 30 years of memories. The kitchen, where Margaret had taught Abigail to bake. The backyard where James had practiced baseball until dark. The hallway where we had marked the children's heights on the wall. The bedroom where Margaret had taken her last breath in my arms. I felt like I had failed her legacy, failed to maintain what we had built together, failed to secure the future she would have wanted for me. Maybe I would indeed die with nothing, just as James had predicted. January arrived with bitter cold and gray skies that matched my mood. I had nearly resigned myself to calling James and telling him he was right. The house was too much. I needed to be practical, but fate had other plans. On a Tuesday morning, the doorbell rang. A postal worker stood on my porch with a certified letter requiring my signature. The envelope bore the letterhead of Wilson, Bennett and Associates, attorneys at law, from Burlington, Vermont. Inside was a brief formal letter requesting my presence at their office at my earliest convenience regarding the estate of Margaret Eleanor Dawson. A contact number was provided for scheduling an appointment. I read the letter multiple times, confusion growing with each reading. We had no connections to Vermont. Margaret had never mentioned any business or property there. Our wills, simple documents prepared years ago by a local attorney, were stored in our safe deposit box at the bank in Boston. What could a Vermont law firm possibly have to do with Margaret's estate, which had been settled months ago? I called the number and spoke with a polite receptionist who scheduled an appointment for the following Monday. When I asked for details, she said only that attorney Thomas Wilson would explain everything in person. The mystery of it kept me awake that night, wondering what final surprise Margaret might have arranged. Rather than telling James or Abigail about the letter, I decided to investigate on my own first. I made the 6-hour drive to Burlington on Sunday, checking into a modest hotel near the law office. The next morning, I arrived 15 minutes early for my 10 o'clock appointment, parking my weathered truck among the luxury vehicles in the visitor spaces. The law office occupied the top floor of a modern building overlooking Lake Champlain. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided spectacular views of the water and distant mountains. I felt immediately out of place in my best but worn suit, surrounded by gleaming surfaces and original artwork. The receptionist, however, greeted me warmly and offered coffee before escorting me to a conference room with the same impressive view. Attorney Thomas Wilson entered a few minutes later. He was older than I expected, perhaps in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind designer glasses. He smiled broadly when he saw me, extending his hand. "Mr. Dawson, thank you for making the journey. Margaret spoke of you often." I shook his hand, my confusion evident. "You knew my wife?" "Very well, for many years." He gestured to a chair. Please, make yourself comfortable. We have much to discuss." As I sat, questions tumbled from my mouth. I don't understand. Margaret never mentioned knowing anyone in Vermont. When would she have met you? Wilson settled into his chair across from me. Margaret first came to me approximately 15 years ago. She had been a client ever since, though we conducted most of our business by phone and email after our initial meetings. 15 years? But that was impossible. I would have known if Margaret had been regularly traveling to Vermont or consulting with an attorney there. Wouldn't I? As if reading my thoughts, Wilson continued gently. I understand this comes as a surprise. Margaret wanted it that way. She was very specific about when and how you would learn about her arrangements. What arrangements? I asked, my heartbeat quickening. Wilson opened a folder on the table. Margaret inherited a modest sum from her grandmother when she turned 30. Did you know about that? I nodded. About $20,000. We discussed using it for a home down payment, but she wanted to keep it separate for emergencies. I respected that decision. Wilson smiled. The initial inheritance was indeed $20,000. But Margaret was quite an astute investor, with some guidance. She decided very early to keep these funds and their growth separate from your family finances. He turned the folder toward me. Inside were statements from investment accounts, property deeds, and legal documents, all bearing Margaret's name. My eyes widened as I scanned the numbers, trying to make sense of them. Margaret established a diverse portfolio, Wilson explained. Stocks, bonds, some carefully selected real estate investments. She was conservative but strategic. The growth over the decades was quite impressive. I stared at him, struggling to comprehend. Are you saying Margaret had investment accounts I didn't know about? Wilson nodded. Multiple accounts, actually. And 12 years ago, she purchased a property on Lake Champlain. He slid several photographs across the table. A beautiful lakefront home with large windows, a wraparound porch, and a private dock. I picked up the photos with trembling hands. This is hers? Ours? Technically, it was in her name. As of this meeting, everything transfers to you, as per her instructions. He placed a bank statement before me. The combined assets, including the property, totaled just over $3 million. The room seemed to spin around me. $3 million? It was an unimaginable sum for a man who had been selling tools to pay for roof repairs. But why? Why keep all this secret from me? Wilson reached into a drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front, in Margaret's familiar handwriting. I recognized the curve of her R's, the distinctive way she crossed her T's. Margaret asked me to give you this when we met. I believe it will answer many of your questions. I took the envelope, noticing it carried the faint scent of her favorite perfume. With unsteady fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded several pages of her personal stationery. My darling Ricky, if you are reading this, I am gone, and Tom Wilson has contacted you as instructed. First, I must ask your forgiveness for the secrets I have kept. It was the only time in our marriage that I wasn't completely honest with you, and that decision wasn't made lightly. When James started his business ventures in his 20s, I saw something in him that worried me. His relationship with money, his appetite for risk, and his increasingly lavish lifestyle reminded me too much of my own father, who lost everything chasing get-rich-quick schemes. When James asked us to invest in his friend's startup, which later failed, my concerns deepened. I began to worry about our financial security, especially for your retirement years. I knew you would work yourself to the bone to provide for us, but I wanted insurance against the unexpected. The inheritance from my grandmother gave me the opportunity to create that safety net. Over the years, as the investments grew, I contemplated telling you many times, but I saw how proud you were of providing for our family through your hard work. I didn't want to diminish that pride, or suggest I didn't have complete faith in you. And as James' occasional financial troubles continued, I became increasingly certain that keeping these assets separate was the right decision. The Vermont house was meant to be a surprise for our 50th anniversary. I imagined us retiring there, watching sunsets from the porch, fishing from the dock, hosting grandchildren during summers. I visited whenever I told you I was attending education conferences or visiting old college friends. It became my special project, furnishing it slowly over time, imagining our future there together. Cancer changed those plans, as it changed so many things. During my illness, I updated all the legal documents to ensure a smooth transition of assets to you upon my death. Tom Wilson has been instructed to help you manage these investments if you wish, or you can choose your own financial advisor. My darling, you were never going to die with nothing. You gave me a lifetime of love, security, and happiness. This is my gift to you, a chance to finally enjoy the fruits of our labor without worry or stress. Tell the children when you feel the time is right. My only request is that you use some of the money to take care of yourself in the ways I no longer can. All my love, for all time, Margaret. P.S. The lake is perfect for fishing. I read the letter twice, tears blurring my vision. Wilson sat quietly, allowing me time to process this extraordinary revelation. Finally, he spoke. Margaret was a remarkable woman, Mr. Dawson. She thought of everything. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. Take your time, Wilson said gently. This is undoubtedly overwhelming. When you're ready, I have more documents for you to review and sign, transferring everything into your name. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. My mind was racing with questions, emotions, and realizations. Did she ever bring anyone to the lake house? Family? Friends? Wilson shook his head. No, she was quite private about it. She said it was your future place together, and she wanted you to be the first family member to see it. I thought about Margaret secretly planning this alternate future for us, while maintaining our everyday life. The magnitude of her foresight, her love, her protection, overwhelmed me. Would you like to see the property today? Wilson asked. I have the keys here, and it's only 20 minutes away. You're welcome to stay there as long as you wish. It's yours now. I nodded. Yes, I think Margaret would want that. As we stood to leave, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying lifted from my shoulders. James' words echoed in my mind. He'll die with nothing. How wrong he had been. How little he knew about the extraordinary woman who had been his mother. The hotel room felt confining after the revelations of the day. I paced the small space, Margaret's letter in one hand, the keys to our Vermont house in the other. My emotions swung between wonder, betrayal, gratitude, and confusion. I needed air, space to think. Bundling up against the January cold, I walked along the frozen shoreline of Lake Champlain. The winter sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ice. How had Margaret kept such enormous secrets? We had shared everything in our marriage, or so I had believed. What else might I not have known about the woman who had been my wife for over 4 decades? Yet even as these questions surfaced, I could not sustain any real anger toward her. The letter explained her motivations, her fears for our financial security, her protective instincts. In her own way, she had been safeguarding our future, creating a safety net neither James nor life's misfortunes could threaten. The next morning, I drove to the address Wilson had given me. The lake house stood on a wooded lot at the end of a private road. Snow covered the long driveway and blanketed the wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides of the house. Even in winter, I could see why Margaret had fallen in love with this place. The view of the lake was breathtaking, the mountains rising majestically on the distant shore. With shaking hands, I unlocked the front door. The interior was exactly as shown in the photos, but being there in person was entirely different. Margaret's touches were everywhere. Family photos arranged on a bookshelf. Her collection of bird figurines displayed in a glass cabinet. Books about local history, fishing, and gardening filled the built-in shelves flanking a stone fireplace. I moved slowly from room to room, discovering a house I never knew existed but that somehow felt familiar. The kitchen had the same blue and white color scheme as our Boston home. The master bedroom featured a quilt nearly identical to one Margaret's mother had made for us as a wedding gift. Even the coffee mugs in the cupboard were the same brand we had always used. In the study, I found Margaret's desk with a locked drawer. The small key on my new keyring opened it to reveal a leather journal. Inside, in Margaret's handwriting, were entries spanning 10 years. Her secret visits to Vermont, her plans for the gardens come spring, notes about which rooms would be perfect for grandchildren, ideas for my workshop in the detached garage. The 17th of October 2018. Found the perfect fishing spot off the dock today. The neighbor says it's excellent for bass in the spring. I can just imagine Ricky sitting there at sunrise, so content. Only 5 more years until our 50th, when I can finally share this place with him. The 3rd of March, 2020. Started feeling unusually tired lately. Probably nothing, but scheduled a doctor appointment just in case. The master bathroom renovation is complete. Chose the walk-in shower Ricky always wanted, instead of a tub. The 10th of September 2020. The diagnosis came yesterday. Cancer. Haven't told Ricky yet. Need time to process. Called Tom Wilson to update the will and transfer documents. No matter what happens, Ricky will have this place and financial security. I'm more grateful than ever that I started this plan years ago. The final entry was dated just 3 weeks before she died. The 30th of April 2021. Tom visited the hospital today. All legal matters are in order. I'm at peace knowing Ricky will be taken care of. My only regret is that we won't see this place together. But he'll feel me here, in every room, in every detail, chosen with him in mind. My final act of love. I closed the journal, overcome with emotion. Margaret had created this sanctuary while anticipating a future we would never share. Yet in her final days, she had found comfort in knowing I would eventually discover it. That night, I slept in our Vermont bed, surrounded by Margaret's choices, her plans, her love. In the morning, I began to understand her motivation more clearly. I remembered James's failed business ventures in his 20s, how he had come to us seeking loans Margaret had reluctantly granted. I recalled the startup investment she had mentioned in her letter, money we never saw again. I thought about Margaret's careful management of our household finances, how she always insisted on maintaining separate emergency savings. Her comments about having a safety net that I never fully questioned. All these years, she had been quietly protecting our future from James's influence and financial demands. After 2 days of reflection, I called Abigail. Her initial shock at my whereabouts quickly turned to amazement as I explained the situation. A secret house in Vermont? $3 million? Dad, this is incredible. Are you okay? I'm still processing it all, I admitted. Can you come up here? I'd like you to see this place. Abigail arrived the next day, her eyes widening as she took in the lake house. We spent hours exploring together, finding childhood mementos Margaret had saved, family photos we'd forgotten existed, even some of Abigail's artwork from elementary school framed and displayed proudly. Mom sometimes mentioned checking on a property for the school district. Abigail recalled as we sat before the fireplace. I never thought anything of it. She was so matter-of-fact about it. Your mother was protecting us, I said, especially me. She knew how James could be about money. She saw this coming long before I did. Abigail's expression sobered. What are you going to do about James? Are you going to tell him? The question had been weighing on me since my meeting with Wilson. Eventually. But first, I need to understand everything fully, and I need a plan. The relief in Abigail's eyes was unmistakable. I'm so glad you don't have to worry about money anymore, Dad. I've been so concerned. Her support strengthened my resolve. The next day, I met with Attorney Wilson again. He explained Margaret's carefully structured will, how everything had been legally transferred to my name, and the protections in place against potential challenges. Margaret anticipated possible disagreements, Wilson said carefully. The trust is ironclad. While you're free to share as you see fit, no one can force distributions or sales against your wishes. We discussed tax implications, financial management options, and how to handle the properties. Wilson suggested a formal family meeting once I had decided how to proceed. Many clients find it helpful to have these discussions in a neutral setting, with professional guidance, he advised. I'd be happy to host such a meeting at our offices, if you wish. I agreed, a plan taking shape in my mind. I would need to address James's behavior directly, but from a position of strength, not vulnerability. Over the next week, I spent time in the Vermont house, connecting with Margaret's vision. I explored the lakeside community she had chosen for our retirement. Neighbors recognized me from photos Margaret had shared, welcoming me warmly, sharing stories of her visits that filled in more pieces of the puzzle. As January turned to February, I felt a transformation within myself. The despair and helplessness of recent months gave way to something new: determination, confidence, a sense of purpose. Margaret had trusted me with this incredible gift. Now I needed to honor that trust by standing up for myself and re-establishing boundaries with my son. I returned to Boston without revealing my discoveries. The family home that had recently felt like a financial burden now represented a choice rather than a necessity. I walked through the rooms with new eyes, appreciating the memories but no longer feeling trapped by them. James called twice that week, leaving messages about a potential buyer interested in the house. I did not return his calls immediately. Instead, I carefully planned my approach. When I finally called him back, I kept my tone neutral. "James, I've been thinking about what you said. I'd like to have a family meeting to discuss my future plans." His voice brightened immediately. "That's great news, Dad. I have some retirement community brochures I can bring over tonight." "Actually," I said firmly, "I'd prefer to meet next Saturday at the Harborview Hotel. I've reserved a conference room for 10 in the morning. Abigail and David will be there too." His enthusiasm dimmed slightly at the formal arrangement. "That seems unnecessarily complicated for a family discussion. Nevertheless, that's how I'd like to proceed. There will be another person joining us as well, a financial advisor who's been helping me assess my situation." After a pause, James agreed. I made similar arrangements with attorney Wilson, who agreed to fly to Boston for the meeting. I asked Abigail to pick up James and Amanda, so they couldn't leave early if the conversation became uncomfortable. The week leading up to the meeting felt surreal. I continued my normal routine while carrying the knowledge of my transformed circumstances. I paid bills that had previously caused anxiety. I hired a contractor to fix the roof without worrying about the cost. I even bought a new winter coat to replace my threadbare one, a small luxury that felt significant. Saturday morning arrived clear and cold. I arrived at the hotel early to compose my thoughts. The conference room overlooked Boston Harbor, the water glittering in the winter sunlight. Attorney Wilson arrived precisely on time, professional in his tailored suit, carrying a slim briefcase. "Are you ready for this, Mr. Dawson?" he asked kindly. "Call me Ricky," I said, extending my hand. And yes, I believe I am. Abigail, David, James, and Amanda arrived together at 5 minutes to 10. James entered the room with the confident stride of someone arriving to take charge of a situation. He carried a notepad filled with what appeared to be talking points. His expression faltered momentarily when he saw attorney Wilson setting up a laptop and projector. "Dad, who's this?" James asked, his tone hovering between curiosity and suspicion. "This is Thomas Wilson, an attorney from Burlington, Vermont. He'll be assisting us today." James and Amanda exchanged confused glances as everyone took their seats. Abigail sat beside me, offering silent support with her presence. I began simply. "Thank you all for coming. I've asked you here because it's time to clarify some things about my financial situation and future plans." James leaned forward eagerly. "I've researched several excellent retirement communities that would be perfect for your needs, Dad, and I've already had interest from potential buyers for the house." "James," I said quietly, "please allow me to finish. This isn't going to be the conversation you're expecting." I nodded to Wilson, who began his presentation. "Good morning. I'm Thomas Wilson of Wilson, Bennett and Associates. I had the privilege of serving as Margaret Dawson's attorney for approximately 15 years. The screen behind him displayed the first slide. Estate of Margaret Eleanor Dawson. James's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as Wilson methodically outlined Margaret's investments, their growth over the years, and the Vermont property. Slides showing bank statements, property deeds, and investment accounts appeared in succession. The final slide showed the total value, $3,147,892. The room fell silent. Amanda's mouth had literally dropped open. Abigail, though already aware, still looked impressed by the formal presentation. James stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "This is impossible," he finally said. "Mom didn't have this kind of money. This has to be some kind of mistake." "No mistake," Wilson replied calmly. "Mrs. Dawson was an astute investor who built this portfolio over many years. Everything has been legally transferred to your father's ownership, as per her instructions." I took a deep breath, gathering my courage for what needed to be said next. "James, on my birthday last year, I overheard you talking to Amanda on the back porch." His face paled slightly. "You said I would die with nothing. You called me a financial burden. You said your mother would be disappointed in me." James started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish." Those words hurt me deeply, not just because they came from my son, but because they revealed how little you truly knew your mother and how little faith you had in me. I removed Margaret's letter from my pocket. "Your mother wrote this to me before she died. In it, she explains why she kept these assets secret." I read the section about her concerns regarding James's financial attitudes and his previous failed ventures. "She was protecting me, James. From financial uncertainty, yes, but also from pressure to use our retirement savings for your business schemes or lifestyle." James's face flushed red. "That's absurd. I never pressured you or Mom for money. The startup investment? The loan for your first office space? The money for your down payment that was never repaid?" I listed quietly. "Your mother remembered each instance, even if you've forgotten." "Those were legitimate business needs," James protested. "And that was years ago. I'm successful now. I don't need your money. And yet you've been pushing me to sell my home, move into assisted living, and presumably make those funds available for—" "What exactly, James?" Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. James glared at me, then at Wilson, then at Abigail. "This is ridiculous. I was trying to help you make sensible decisions. That house is too big for you. It needs constant maintenance. It was practical advice, not some scheme to get your money." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But you didn't present it as advice. You went behind my back, brought a realtor into my home without permission, and discussed my finances with family members as if I were incompetent." James's initial denials eventually gave way to accusations. He questioned the authenticity of the documents. He suggested Margaret wasn't in her right mind during her illness. He demanded to know why he hadn't been informed sooner about these assets. Wilson calmly addressed each objection with facts and legal citations, making it clear that everything was properly executed and binding. James gradually realized he had no ground to stand on, his righteous indignation slowly transforming into defensive self-justification. "I was just concerned about your financial security," he insisted. "Everything I did was out of concern for your well-being." I looked directly into my son's eyes. "If that were true, you would have asked what I wanted, instead of telling me what I needed to do. You would have respected my home and my choices. You wouldn't have discussed me as a burden or a problem to solve." For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine shame cross James's face. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "I'm moving to the Vermont house," I explained. "It's what your mother wanted for us. I'll be selling the Boston house, but on my timeline, not yours. I'm financially independent and capable of making my own decisions." I softened my tone. "I want us to heal as a family, James, but that requires respect and boundaries. I'm inviting both you and Abigail to visit Vermont, to see the beautiful home your mother created. But on my terms, not as financial advisors or caretakers, but as my children. I explained that we would have another family meeting in 3 months. Time for emotions to settle and new patterns to establish. James listened silently, his earlier confidence completely deflated. As the meeting concluded, Wilson provided copies of key documents to everyone present. James barely glanced at his folder, while Amanda studied hers with intense interest. Before leaving, James approached me awkwardly. "Dad, I never meant." "I know, son," I said, not quite ready to absolve him completely, but opening the door to reconciliation. "We'll talk more soon." As I watched him leave with Amanda, I felt neither triumph nor vindication. Only a bittersweet certainty that Margaret had known exactly what she was doing all along. She had protected me when she was alive, and continued to do so even after she was gone. Spring came early to Vermont that year. By March, the ice on Lake Champlain began breaking up, creating a symphony of cracks and shifts that carried across the water. I had been living in the lake house full-time for 6 weeks, slowly making it truly mine while honoring Margaret's vision. I sold the Boston house in April, not in a rushed sale, as James had wanted, but with a careful real estate agent who helped me get full market value. The process was bittersweet, sorting through decades of possessions, deciding what to bring to Vermont and what to let go. Abigail helped, spending weekends packing boxes and sharing memories tied to each room. The Vermont house had a detached 2-car garage that Margaret had clearly intended for my workshop. Large windows let in natural light, the walls were already finished, and electrical outlets were plentiful. I set up my remaining tools, adding new ones to replace those I had sold during my financial struggles. Working with my hands had always brought me peace, and the workshop quickly became my sanctuary. Behind the house, I discovered Margaret's gardening plans in a waterproof container tucked inside the garden shed. Detailed drawings showed flower beds, vegetable gardens, and a small orchard of apple and pear trees. I began implementing her vision as the ground thawed, finding unexpected joy in continuing what she had started. The neighbors Margaret had befriended welcomed me warmly. Edward and Louise Miller, retired professors who lived 2 properties over, invited me for dinner regularly. Howard Schmidt, a Vietnam veteran like myself, introduced me to the local VFW post. Gradually, I built a community in this place Margaret had chosen for us. One of my first financial decisions was to help Abigail pay off her student loans. The look of disbelief on her face when I handed her the check brought tears to my eyes. "Dad, you don't have to do this," she protested. "I know, but your mother would want me to. She always said education was the best investment." I also established college funds for her 3 children. Abigail and David brought the family to visit on weekends, the kids quickly claiming favorite spots around the property. My youngest granddaughter, Emma, took special interest in the garden, helping me plant the flowers Margaret had specified in her plans. My grandson Michael discovered a talent for fishing off the dock, just as Margaret had predicted I would enjoy. The walls that had been sparsely decorated when I arrived gradually filled with family photos. Margaret's bird figurines found new spots on shelves and windowsills. The house began to feel like ours rather than just hers or mine. James and I had minimal contact during the first 3 months after our confrontation. He called on my birthday and Easter, brief, awkward conversations that neither of us knew how to navigate. But in May, a thick envelope arrived with a Vermont postmark. Inside was a lengthy handwritten letter from James. He apologized for his behavior, his assumptions, and most of all for the hurtful words I had overheard. He wrote about attending therapy with Amanda, exploring why money and status had become so important to him. He asked if they could visit sometime in the summer, with no agenda beyond reconnecting. I called him that evening. "I'd like that, son. The fishing is supposed to be excellent in June." His first visit was uncomfortable for us both. He arrived overdressed in expensive casual wear that looked out of place by the lake. He asked too many questions about the house value and property taxes before catching himself. But by the second day, as we sat in silence on the dock with fishing lines in the water, something shifted between us. "Mom really knew what she was doing, didn't she?" he said quietly. In all things I agreed. She saw what the rest of us missed. "I'm sorry, Dad. For everything." I know. That simple exchange marked the beginning of our healing. James and his family began visiting regularly throughout the summer. His children, previously glued to electronic devices, discovered the joy of swimming in the lake and exploring the woods. James himself seemed to relax, leaving his phone behind more often, engaging in actual conversations rather than business discussions. One evening, as we grilled steaks on the deck, James confessed that his business wasn't doing as well as he pretended. The lavish lifestyle had been partially maintained through increasing debt. The constant pressure for more deals, more properties, more status had been taking a toll on his marriage and health. "I didn't want to admit it, but I've been making the same mistakes Grandfather did," he said, referring to Margaret's father, "always chasing the next big thing instead of appreciating what I have." It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. I didn't offer financial help, and he didn't ask for it. Instead, I listened as he worked through his realizations aloud. To honor Margaret's memory, I established a scholarship in her name at the local high school. The Margaret Dawson Education Scholarship would help promising students who wanted to become teachers. I also continued her tradition of anonymous giving in the community, funding the summer reading program at the library, and contributing to the food pantry. Each morning, I woke to the view of the lake she had chosen for us. Each evening, I watched the sunset from the porch swing she had installed. In these quiet moments, I felt her presence most strongly, not as a ghost or spiritual visitation, but as the culmination of her love expressed through planning and protection. My healing journey wasn't always smooth. Some days I felt betrayed that she had kept such significant secrets. Other days I was overwhelmed with gratitude for her foresight. The complex emotions gradually resolved into a deeper understanding of the woman I had loved for over 4 decades. She had known me better than I knew myself, anticipating my needs, protecting me from pain she wouldn't be there to help me through. Her secret financial planning hadn't been a lack of trust, but the ultimate expression of it. She trusted that I would understand her motives once I discovered the truth. She trusted that I would use her gift wisely. She trusted that I would find the strength to stand up for myself when necessary. I often think about how assumptions nearly cost our family everything. James assumed I was financially incompetent. I assumed my son still respected me. We both assumed we understood Margaret completely. How wrong we all were. The greatest miracle isn't the money or the property, though those changed my life immeasurably. The miracle is second chances, the opportunity to rebuild relationships I thought were broken beyond repair. The discovery that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, to demand respect. Financial security brings peace of mind, but family healing brings peace of heart. I'm fortunate to have found both in this unexpected chapter of my life. Margaret's final gift wasn't just material wealth, but the catalyst for transformation she knew our family needed. Even in her absence, she remains the wisest among us, guiding us toward better versions of ourselves. Has someone in your life ever surprised you with their foresight or protection, even after they were gone? Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of family betrayal, unexpected inheritance, and healing resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Your support helps me continue sharing these life lessons with others who might need to hear them. Thank you for listening to my story today. And remember, sometimes the people we think we know best can still surprise us in the most beautiful ways.